So, get your pens out, everybody, because we're going to start with this. We're going to have a spelling test. Okay? I'm going to give you 5 spellings. On your little piece of paper, you need to put your name at the top because you're going to be swapping your papers and somebody else is going to mark them. So I'm going to do that thing where you put your name on the top, please, first, and put 1 to 5 down the side. And when you've done that, somebody else is going to mark them, and then we're going to find out how you've done, and somebody else is going to look at how you've done out of 5. Oh, quick! You're going to spell a test. Quick. You need that. You need a pen. 1 to 5, name on the top, spelling test. What a great way to start a workshop. Okay. Yes? Get cozy. Oh, I see. Get cozy. We need this quickly because we're about to start spelling test. Okay, spelling number 1. Are you ready? And please, no cheating. I don't want to have to tell anybody off and give them a sanction for cheating. So, number 1, phenomenon. Don't forget to put your names on the top, please. 1 to 5 down the side. You've got to have your names on the top because when we swap them, we need to make sure we humiliate people. Phenomenon. Number 2, criticism. Criticism. Number 3, no copying, no cheating. Number 3, alliteration. Oh God, somebody said alliteration. Get ready for number 4, onomatopoeia. Onomatopoeia. What does it mean, somebody said? Number 5, she's got away with that one spelling test. Number 5, and the last one, number 5, successful. Slightly awkward one. Okay, make sure your names are on the top, please. And then once your names are on the top, I'd like you to just screw them up and put them away. Okay, right. Time for a bit of honest reflection. Anybody feel a little bit edgy and a little bit tense about doing the spelling test? Hands up if you felt a little bit under pressure. Hands up if you felt under more pressure the fact that somebody might find out how rubbish you were. Hands up if you felt some sort of physical response to that. And when I talk physical, I'm talking about that slight little tingle or that nervous energy. That's a physical response as well. You know, hairs on the back of your neck and all that sort of stuff. And just that little bit of tension that builds in your body about the possibility of being humiliated. The thing is that you lot in here are all emotionally literate in theory, which means that actually if I'd have gone through with that and passed those, and we'd have passed them around, you'd have actually been okay. You'd have put on a brave face and you'd have been okay. And that's fine. The problem is not everybody is emotionally literate. And I'm no neuroscientist, so I've just got a little cartoon. Can you see that? And what we've got is we've got these 3 parts of the brain. And we can't help it. This is what happens. This is what happens to you, and it's what happens to children. And it happens all the time. So we've got thinking and learning brain, and we've got emotions and feelings. And what happens when you put people under pressure? And when you put children under pressure in a classroom situation, or in a playground situation, or when they're under pressure at home, or wherever it might be, things start to happen in their brains. The first thing that goes is that, emotional feelings. The second thing that goes is thinking and learning. And then what we do is we kick into the reptilian brain, this bit of the brain. And this is just nature's way. There's nothing we can do about it. Now the thing is, you can control that. You can control that reaction. Some people can't. Particularly children who aren't socially and emotionally developed. Okay? And that's our starting point. Because Reptilian kicks into primitive reflexes, and those primitive reflexes take over. That's when the old animal thinker kicks in. There's a reason why they call it a reptilian brain. So what you get there is this. It's the 4 Fs. And I'm sure you've all seen it before. Okay, and you all understand it, but it's real, and it happens. So what happens to a pupil who's doing a spellings test, who knows that he can't do those 5 spellings? And he knows that in a few minutes' time, somebody might highlight him as not being able to do those spellings. And he gets under a little bit of tension. What's he going to do? Is he going to laugh it off? Or is he going to kick the table over and walk out? Because if you're a bit of a lad's lad, what's it better to get 9 out of 5 or to kick the table over and walk out? Well, to a lot of people it's a bit easier and you're a bit more manly if you kick the table over and walk out than get 0 out of 5 in a spellings test. Now, should you therefore punish that? Should you immediately whip into a sanction situation because somebody has had a reptilian response to being put under unreasonable pressure in a classroom situation? I don't need an answer, I'm just going to fire out some questions. That's the 5th F. We'll not talk about that. Every child who comes into your school, tiny metaphor, every child who comes into your school is like a glass of water, okay? And it all depends on how much water's in the glass. That essentially means how much space they've got to deal with things. And most children, most of the time, that's them there. So when they're coming through the doors of your school on a morning, they've got lots of space within their glass to deal with what you throw at them as teachers every single day. And the pressure that's put on those children can be consumed into that glass, and that's fine. The problem is, we also have some children like this. Because what they do is they come already with baggage. They're already dealing with things. They're already dealing with things from home, and from their communities, and from their lifestyles. And they walk into that school, and their glass is already half. And there's already only that much room to deal with the pressures that you put them on them. These are the children at my school, okay? And I really mean that. They already arrive with their glass full. And all it takes is a drop in pipette of pressure of water on the top, and it tips over, and they can't cope with it. So the skill of the teacher is to deal with all 3. Now, what I think is that, okay, you've got choices, systems within your classrooms and with your schools, the way you teach, the way you develop relationships with pupils, and you've got a choice. Do you build those systems and those relationships and those approaches around that child? Because if you do, what happens if you get that child and that child in your classroom? Or do you build your systems around this child? Because if you do, these 2 will be fine. So the challenge is, how do we do that? Okay? So when this person arrives in your school, think about the question, do sanctions work? That child comes already full. So if he spills over at 9:05 on a morning, does that trigger a sanction for spilling over when you've got no idea what happened at home before he walked through the door? But yet he's in danger of getting a sanction straight away because that's what you do, and that's what the system says, that if somebody does this, that's what they get. This is something called the circle of influence, and the circle of influence starts there in home. And every child is born into a circle of intimacy, every single child. Okay? And the circle of intimacy, particularly for the first 5 years, particularly for the first 5 years of life, is absolutely crucial to everything that they do. So, child, circle of intimacy, mum, dad, brothers and sisters, the people in their homes, the people who they live with every single day in that circle of intimacy. The first 5 years of development, therefore, are crucial. Now, if that's a warm, friendly, loving environment, then everything's fine, isn't it? Okay? What if swearing is commonplace? Domestic violence and drug abuse are rife within that home? What if there's no love and no intimacy as we know it? Then what happens over those developmental years is that is lost in the first 5 years. That just does not exist, and it's very, very difficult to replace. Now the thing is with the circle of intimacy, we have to start building from that, because as we build out from the circle of intimacy, we get something we call a circle of friendship. And the circle of friendship is where children start to develop different sorts of relationships, and the circle of friendship is where they also start to build different sorts of behaviours and learn different sorts of behaviours. The circle of friendship is where children learn how to go into conspiracy against people, the circle of friendship. The circle of friendship is where they say, where grandma says, there's a bar of chocolate, don't tell your mum. And it's okay. I'm going to tell you a story about a little boy. And this little boy went to school, and it was his carol concert, it was only in primary school, and he had to go to the church. And when he went to the church, you know, he's got his tea towel on his head and all that sort of stuff at Christmas. And his auntie was watching him, and she'd come really early, you know, put a towel down on the front row and got rid of so that she could see him. And she was sitting there watching him, really proud auntie. And when he'd finished and they were lining up to come out of the church, probably about 10:30 in the morning, he walked up and he was queuing up in the church, and he happened to stand next to his auntie Pat. And his auntie Pat passed him a bar of chocolate and said, don't tell your teacher. Bar of chocolate. He put it up his sleeve and kept it up his sleeve until 3:30. And then at 3:30 he came out to the playground, and one picked it up and popped it out, and he had what my auntie Pat gave me. And he went into a conspiracy against his teacher, but he'd learned how to be with that conspiracy, and he'd learned it was okay to go into that sort of conspiracy, and actually it was a nice conspiracy. But that's only because he had that really positive circle of friendship. We then move on to something we call the circle of participation. And the circle of participation is where children start to really learn how to be with other adults. Other adults who have got power and influence and control over them, but in a nice way, because the kids actually want to be there. So that's your scouts and your brownies and your swimming club and your football club. And the sort of things that lovely, nice, middle class children do, and they're developing relationships and they're developing behaviours all the time. Now, I hope you're starting to think about some of the children that you might teach and think, is this nicely what happens with the children that you have in your classrooms who show challenging behaviour? Because it probably isn't. Because the ones that have got the challenging behaviour are the ones that don't have a nice circle of intimacy. They very rarely have a circle of friendship anyway. And they certainly don't have a circle of participation, because they just don't do anything apart from play on their Xbox. But then what we've got, finally, right at the end, is we've got this. And this is the circle of exchange, and that's you.